America is not like a blanket, one piece of unbroken cloth, the same color, the same texture, the same size. America is more like a quilt, many patches, many pieces, many colors, many sizes, all woven and held together by a common thread. The white, the Hispanic, the black, the Arab, the Jew, the woman, the Native American, the small farmer, the business person, the environmentalist, the peace activist, the young, the old, the lesbian, the gay, and the disabled make up the American quilt.
I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, and I should stick to the issue of racial justice. But I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere."
In 1983, Coretta asked openly gay poet Audre Lorde to speak at a rally celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. It was considered an unofficial welcome to the LGBTQ community from Coretta, the King Center, and the civil rights movement as a whole. In 1993, Coretta held a press conference urging President Bill Clinton to repeal his "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy, banning LGBTQ people from serving openly in the military. It would be 2011 before President Barack Obama repealed the rule. Coretta eventually shifted her focus to legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. She publicly denounced President George W. Bush's support for a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage and fearlessly fought for nationwide same-sex marriage until her death in 2006.
Marriage equality was a critical step, but the struggle is not over. There are forces in America today want to take us back, but we come too far and we made too much progress, and we're not going back, we're going forward. It is still possible to be denied housing, to be fired from your job, denied service in this country just because of sexual orientation. There's still great work to be done, and it's up to each one of us.
Many times in the history of our country, the question of my inalienable rights has come before the Supreme Court of the United States. And this court has been asked to adjudicate and rule on my rights as a woman, as an African American, as a worker, and now as a same-gender loving woman who has been in a loving relationship with my partner Shirley for 29 years. We were legally married during the window of opportunity in California, and now I stand on behalf of all couples, our families, our friends, and our religious communities to thank our supporters for your overwhelming support for our right to marry.
There is no doubt that there are people who are same-gender loving, occupying prominent places in the church. But for the clergy to hide with a quick, dismissive claim of poor biblical scholarship is as sinful as unthoughtful acceptance. When we make biblical claims without sound interpretation, we adopt doctrinal positions devoid of the love ethic. Deep faith may resonate in our position, but the ethic of love will always force you to re-examine and prayerfully reconsider your position.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Don Abram. I'm the founder of Pride in the Pews, an organization dedicated to bridging the gap between the Black church and the LGBTQ+ community. I am absolutely delighted to be partnering with Trinity UCC and the Office of Illinois State Representative Lamont J. Robinson to celebrate and honor Black faith leaders who have contributed to the LGBTQ+ movement. The honorees today have advanced the LGBTQ+ movement with clarity, conviction, and concrete action. Their voice, their prophetic leadership, and insistence on honoring all of God's children has impacted the lives of the LGBTQ+ community in innumerable ways. We are here today to honor their legacy, to honor their contributions, and inspire a new generation of Black faith leaders, LGBTQ+ leaders, and allies to advocate for non-discrimination and to ensure that all of God's children has equal access to American citizenry and our democracy. And with that, we are delighted to honor their legacy and their historic contributions today.
Hello, my name is Lamont Robinson. I represent the 5th District in the Illinois General Assembly, and I was honored to be the first Black member of the LGBTQ community to serve in the Illinois General Assembly. I am also deeply appreciative of the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr., who I believe saved my life. You see, as a member of Trinity United Church of Christ, I was struggling with my sexuality from grammar school and high school, and it came to a head as a freshman at Clark Atlanta University, where I wrote Reverend Wright a letter stating my struggle with my sexuality. Reverend Wright wrote me back a 4-page letter that God loved me, that the church loved me, that He loved me, and that I would be okay. And that here are some books to read, here is someone to contact that could help me through this process of figuring out who Lamont was. For me, that was life-changing, because the letter that Reverend Wright sent me could have been the reverse. It could have been a letter that stated that God did not support me, God did not love me, if in fact I was going to go down the path of being gay. Many of us in our community don't have a Reverend Wright. And I believe that that has moved us, unfortunately, to suicide, to drugs, to other things that do not allow us to live our best lives. And so I thank Reverend Wright for his love of me, his love of the community, his love of God, to be able to again share with me that God loves me and that I can be who I am, that I could be the first Black elected that is out in the LGBTQ community. That is because of the work of Reverend Wright, the work of Trinity United Church of Christ. And I will be forever appreciative of Reverend Wright again saving my life. As we look at Roe versus Wade, the decision for Roe versus Wade, this decision is going to hit home to the LGBTQ community. You see, the rights to marry, other rights that we have, can be under attack. And so I think it's important for the LGBTQ community to understand this is a rally cry for us. And for our allies like Reverend Otis Moss and Reverend Wright and Reverend Jackson, we need our allies to support us yet again, because our rights are going to be under attack. And so today I ask that you support your brothers and sisters in this struggle, because our rights are being under attack. Our nation prides itself on tolerance. And so this is the time that we need our faith leaders, our allies, to support the LGBT community. I want to thank Reverend Moss, Reverend Wright, and Reverend Jackson, and many others that have been in this fight to support the LGBTQ community. God bless you, thank you, and we love you.
To Brother Don and members of Pride in the Pews, to our pastor, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, I thank you for hosting, for being one of the hosts for this event. Brother Don, I thank you and members of Pride in the Pew for extending such a high honor to me. I have been a supporter of the LGBTQA plus community for 75 years. I have found it a work of joy and a work of love to be able to go to bat for our brothers and sisters who, just like me and just like Pastor Moss, are made in the image and likeness of God. God loves all of God's children, and I'm grateful to be a part of the supportive community. The story of my life would not be complete without thanking my parents who raised my sister and me in a home that taught us never to discriminate against what God has done. God does not make any junk. God does not make any bad names thrown on people, just as we got rid of the N-word in our vocabularies, the F-word, the D-word, the hurtful words that I heard my colleagues and classmates using as a child. Our parents taught us never to use those words, not even in jokes, unless we had permission from our friends, our relatives, and our close colleagues in the community. Fighting for you has caused me to make many, many enemies. Our denomination, the United Church of Christ, has been on record supporting the LGBTQA plus community since 1975, when at their General Synod, at which I was an attendee and delegate, they voted to ordain gays to the gospel ministry. The Black Church, however, is almost a century behind the United Church of Christ. I've lost friends in the Baptist Church. I've had members of the AME Church put me on their blacklist, literally, put the Samuel Dewitt Proctor Conference on their blacklist, called the conference the Gay Conference, disinvite me to churches because of my stance in support of the LGBTQA plus community, stop speaking to me, not allowing me in their churches or in their pulpits. And like the scripture says, I count it all joy when I think of the friends I've made, the loved ones I've made in our community across 47 years. They cancel out the X factor, X being the community that have banned me and banished me. Thank you for loving me for 47 years. Thank you for giving me the honor of loving you and working alongside you, walking alongside you, worshiping alongside you, praising God alongside you for 47 years. Thank you for this award tonight, for being a supportive ally. And thank you for the work that you do in the pews of the Church of our Lord, who loves all of God's children. God bless you.
I remember where I was the first time I heard the words, "I am a same-gender loving woman because that is the will of God for my life." It was the summer of 2019, and I can remember that moment so distinctly because it had been a mere 2 years since I, after praying the gay away for 28 arduous years, decided to give truth a chance in my life. But like many of us who were raised in the church, who were ministry leaders growing up, who wanted nothing less than to do the will of God for our lives, I was faced with an impossible choice upon coming out. I could, on the one hand, embrace my sexuality and be who I believe that I was created to be without conflict and in alignment with what made sense in my life. Or I could keep on with the church and the understanding that I had and deny myself to the point where I no longer had any denial left within me. Faced with that impossible binary, I chose to say no. I will not choose, and I will have both. And so imagine the relief that came over me that summer of 2019 after trying to piece it together on my own for so long, and finally hearing the words of someone who I had revered and respected, but whose entire story had been unknown to me until that moment, that she was a same-gender loving woman because it was the will of God for her life. And that I too could be a same-gender loving woman, and that could be the will of God for my life. I wrote in a song last year that I feel God speaking in Braille. That is why my hope isn't frail. It's like the Prince of Egypt inside me has been waiting to exhale. And Bishop Flunder, your words were the breath of life that I needed to continue on this journey. When we talk about bringing thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, it is not some great philosophical debate that has no impact on real lives and real people. Outside of the fire that you released within me, that the fullness of who I am included the wholeness of who I am. That set off a chain of events that has now led to this message being amplified both within the church and for those of us who for various reasons were kicked to the outskirts of the church, but still clinged on to God. Bishop Flunder, your work, your life, your ministry, and your testimony provide a guiding light to so many of us who struggle to believe that it could be true that we were made on purpose and with purpose. And so today, with the truth of that in my life and the impact that I have seen in the way that I can go about life, the way that I have been able to pour into others from the singular statement that you made that encompassed so much, I give you honor and I give you thanks. And it is my great joy and privilege to introduce to you Bishop Yvette Flunder. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I am Bishop Yvette Flunder, Senior Pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ and the presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries in all its settings. Many thanks to Don Abrams, founder of Pride in the Pews, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, my younger brother, and my Trinity UCC family, and to the Illinois State Representative, Lamont J. Robinson, for this recognition. Faith-based activism, radical inclusion, and non-discrimination are close to my heart because they are close to the heart of God. I believe in the radically inclusive love of God that is great enough to include all of God's varied expressions in creation. We are not all the same, and we often vilify what we have not experienced as it relates to culture, race, gender, and sexuality. And as a result, people are othered. And the LGBTQI community has experienced this discrimination in housing, employment, healthcare, and being vilified often by society and religion. This is not the heart of God. And we who are African American have a long and sordid history in our march toward freedom. Many of us are not yet free. Those that enslaved and continue to discriminate against us did so and do so, claiming that they have God's favor. I am also a gospel music artist, and the contribution and gifts from the LGBTQI community to the Black church is astounding and often undervalued. I know this story well. And the Black church owes an affirmation and an appreciation to the psalmists, the singers, the musicians, the prophets, the poets, the liturgists, and the many who embraced the church, even when they were not embraced by the church. I believe there is room for all of us, and I am grateful to and for the authentic welcome that exists in many churches and faith-based organizations. Now may the love of God move us toward radical inclusivity, relentless hospitality, and extravagant grace. God bless you is my prayer.
I take this opportunity to introduce a prophet, a preacher, a person who has been shaping the moral imagination of these United States of America. None other than Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson. If I may begin by sharing a story of Reverend Jackson. It was when he first ran for president in 1984. I had the opportunity to travel with my father and mother to the Democratic National Convention, and to sit in that convention and hear Reverend Jackson give a moral vision of what America could be through what we now know as the Rainbow Push Coalition. And it was Reverend Jackson in '84 and in '88 who taught the Democratic Party how to build coalitions. He was going through the South, building relationships not just with people of African descent, but people in rural communities who were farmers, those who were left out, those who were dealing with the tattered vestiges of the Reagan era. It was Reverend Jackson who was building relationships with those who were first world people across the United States, along with those in the Appalachian region and those who were LGBTQIA+. He was ahead of his time, stating that every person who is a citizen in the United States of America should have full protection and have the opportunity to thrive and build their life here in these United States of America. It was Reverend Jackson who was speaking up for Palestinians, and it was Reverend Jackson who was standing flat-footed, demanding equal rights for those who were same-gender loving. An amazing prophet who was ahead of his time. Often we don't appreciate prophets when they are living, but we take this time to simply give Reverend Jackson his flowers while he can still smell them. I am proud to partner with Pride in the Pews, the founder, Don Abrams, as we honor none other than the prophet from the south side of Chicago, the country preacher from South Carolina, the great baseball player and football player, the presidential candidate, the moral visionary, none other than Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson.
I grew up in the cigarette south of our own country. I was in South Africa many years ago, and there we found the position of marginalization in its most profound sense. I made the case that the human rights for all human beings was measured by one yardstick. The nagging culture in South Africa was to just race, marginalize people of color. Today we have the same disease relative to the LGBTQ community. It has no place. Some of the most profound members of the church are gay. Ministers of the gospel are gay in the pulpits. Ministers of music are gay. We're not just selling for their preaching to us, singing to us, but they're full human beings. They must be made to feel welcome. They're characterized not by their sexuality. Home violence against LGBTQ is wrong, morally disgraceful. I make this case over and over again. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white, we're all precious in God's sight. Everybody's somebody. Do it all, my friends, don't surrender. Keep alive. There's room for you in the churches. Must be pride in the pulpits, pride in the pews. God bless you.
We are in an age where we are seeing rights taken away. You will hear the echo of people stating, we want to make America great again. I always say, what year are you talking about? Are you talking about 1864, when people of African descent did not have certain rights and this country was in a civil war? Or was it prior to the amendment that allowed women to have the right to vote? We're living in a backlash. And in order to protect the rights of all Americans, in order for us to build a coalition with those who are LGBTQI, plus along with those who are marginalized in other ways, that all those individuals who are marginalized, every community, we need to build a coalition, recognizing that there are forces that want to take away our rights. So what do? One of the things we have to do is political education, better known as civics. Yes, civics is the way that we become advocates for ourselves. There are two amendments that every young person should know about in relationship to the protection of their rights. The way that the Supreme Court of the United States is currently structured, it is attacking the rights of others by interpreting the Constitution with the same framework as legal scholars did in 1861. Yes, 1861. So there are two amendments you need to know about. One is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, which is protection in reference to right of privacy. The other one is the 14th Amendment, which is the Amendment of Citizenship, that everybody has the right to liberty. These two amendments are being attacked. So what must we do? First, our civic education to understand that it's not just about putting someone in office on the level of presidency or Senate, but it's locally. Who are our representatives locally? Who is the person in our county who is mapping out laws? Who is going to be what we know as the state's attorney? These positions, the local positions, is how we advocate for ourselves, but we don't stop there. We have to raise a new generation that is also writing policy and raise a new generation of what I call moral imagination. We have to envision a new nation. Not a nation where we are continuing to give amendments upon a piece of paper that did not include a large portion of people in the United States. But we have to envision, what does a nation look like that is inclusive, where people are able to thrive and function in the area that we know as liberty. But at the same time, the rights of people are protected. That's how we have to advocate in this day and age. So I believe that we have to have a civics course. Some of those civics courses will be taught in churches, in synagogues, in mosques. Some of those civics courses will be taught in local organizations like Pride in the Pews, so we can understand our rights. Then we have to understand local elections, how the state representatives, whether in the Senate or just legislative representatives, affect our life. And then City Council, the Board of Water Reclamation. All of these things are important. And then we've got to write some policy, and then we have to have people with a moral imagination to map out what and how we will create a new nation. What will it look like? How will we do it for this new nation? We have to envision a new world for our children and our children's children. I am honored to be able to partner with Pride in the Pews that we can conceive of a new way of existing and living using our moral imagination. I'm Otis Moss, and I believe in a moral imagination so we can carve out these yet to be United States of America.
I grew up in a hand-clapping, toe-tapping black church on the south side of Chicago. Every Sunday at 11 a.m., my Jamaican patois-speaking grandmother would drag me to church. I loved it. I was an usher board member, I was a choir member, and ultimately I made my way to the pulpit. And at the age of 14, I was called to preach. If you don't mind, I'd like to let you in on that story. It was December 2008. It was a cold, chilly day. I had returned home from school and I drifted asleep. In that vision, I was a celestial being walking into the halls and doors of my home church. And in that moment, I saw a figure in the distance preaching and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't a pastor, it wasn't another nameless minister, it was me. And in that moment, I accepted my call to preach. My career skyrocketed. I was preaching in churches across the city of Chicago and eventually the country. But all of that came to a halt when I embodied the truth of my sexuality. In the twinkling of an eye, I was met with theologies that told me I was not loved by God. In the church that raised and reared me, I was told that I was not enough. My heart was broken. It was completely and utterly shattered. I had to choose between my faith and my sexuality, an impossible decision. With much time and prayer and community, I am now at a place where I can walk boldly in my calling, embodying all of my intersecting identities, knowing that God will use all of them to create a more just world. Unfortunately, in too many churches today, there are many in my community who do not feel the embrace and love of Christ. But not only that, in the public square, as our rights are under attack, too often the Black church is on the sidelines instead of the front lines. This is precisely why I founded Pride in the Pews. I want to bridge the gap between these two beloved communities, the Black church and the LGBTQ+ community, recognizing that we are one in the same. And so with your help, my hope and prayer is that you help us to realize that vision and not only affirm LGBTQ+ members, but also advocate in the public square on our behalf.